topic was just what is an exchange rate? What is the exchange rate market? Are they floating? Are they pegged? So what drives exchange rates up or down? We're just going to, on this topic, talk more about transactions and how do I actually get an exchange rate and what does the quote mean? All right, and talk about how to actually technically calculate appreciations with direct and indirect currencies. It gets a little nasty. All right, so let's talk about that. Let's start from the beginning. I talked about why exchange rates go up or down, but I didn't really talk more about what an exchange rate is and what it represents. So let's just back up a couple steps. All right, this is one of my favorite commodities in the entire world. All right, it's a tall latte, costs about $3 in US. All right, so a direct quote for a latte for an American is $3 per one tall latte. That's a direct quote in US dollars for an American. However, if I take 1 over $3, that is 0.33. That could be the latte price of $1 US. So I can trade $3 and get one latte, or I can trade 1/3 of a latte and get $1 US. All right, so that would be an indirect quote for a latte for an American. Luckily, lattes are always quoted in direct terms, and their prices are determined by Starbucks. But it could be quoted the other way, right? You just say the price of that latte is 0.33 lattes per dollar. Here's another one of my favorite commodities in the world. It's a euro. All right, euros buy German cars and French wines and vacations on the Amalfi Coast. I love euros. All right, euro is trading for about $1.15. That's a direct quote for an American for one single euro. However, you can take 1 over 115 and get 0.87. You can say it costs 0.87 euros to buy $1 US. That would be an indirect quote for an American for a euro. Luckily, the euro is almost always quoted in direct terms for American. And it's the pound, the euro, the Kiwi, and the Australian dollar, New Zealand dollar, they call it Kiwi for some reason. It's easier to say. Are generally the currencies that are quoted in direct terms. All the others are quoted in indirect terms. And by the way, this currency is a free-floating currency. Yeah?
Why are those the ones that are quoted directly?
Good question. My speculation is at the time of financial markets determining how to quote things, those ones happened to be closer to parity with the dollar, kind of. Or it could be more of a British legacy in that all these are kind of British, used to be British territories. I don't know. There's something I've read both, things related to both those concepts. They call them something the British currency, something British area currencies or something like that. I need to figure that out someday. Anyway, I've never gotten a good answer. Every time I look, I never get a good answer. Yeah. All right. Here's another one of my favorite currencies. It's the Danish crown. All right. The Danish crown is about 16 cents to buy 1 crown. That would be a direct quote for an American. If I take 1 over 16, I get 6.25. And that would be the indirect price for a crown for an American. All right. The crown is almost always quoted in indirect terms internationally for an American and in a euro. All right. And most all other currencies are quoted in this funky way. The Danish crown has been historically pegged to the euro. So that's their biggest trading partner. At some point when they were forming the Eurozone, they opted out of the Eurozone but decided to peg to the euro as a compromise. And we'll talk more about that decision next week when we do the Greek case. All right, so we got the euro, that's a direct quote, free float. You got the crown, 6.2 crown per dollar, indirect quote. That one's pegged, this one's free float. All right, there's just 2 basic direct and indirect quotes. Currencies are represented by symbols like dollars and the yen and yuan, but a lot of people also use the dollar. So it's not really useful to use currency symbols. So what you wind up having is all these 3-character codes that specify currencies, and that's how I generally will look for them on the internet. If I need the price of the euro, I'll just type EUR USD, and I'll get the price of the euro. All right. However, when you get quotes, it's a little bit confusing. Like, am I looking at direct? Am I looking at indirect? So here's how I'm going to show you how the world works. That's what you pay me for. Show you how this crazy world works. Here's a quote. you know you're about to get a euro-dollar exchange rate, but you don't know if it's a dollar price of euro or a euro price of a dollar, because it does get flipped sometimes, especially in Bloomberg. You can actually set defaults that flip everything or not flip everything. So how did I know that this is $1.16 and not 1.16 euros? It all is about the codes. So every code, every time I see the euro quoted against a dollar, I see it either this way, all those mean the same thing in international markets. You're just smushing together two codes, right? Every exchange rate has to have two codes, right? It's always the price of the euro denominated in dollars or the price of euro in Chinese yuan or something. Here's how you figure out that this is the dollar price of a euro and not the euro price of a dollar. The first code you always see is called the base code. That's the commodity, or that's the currency you're about to get the price of. All right, you're about to get the price of a euro. It's going to be denominated in the quote code, the second one. So by definition, that must be the dollar price of a euro. Look at this one. Both these, well, this one too. All three of these are prices of the euro. Right, all three of them are. One's the dollar price of a euro, $1.16. One is the yen price of a euro, 129 yen. And one is the pound price of a euro, 89 pence. Is that what they, British, what is that? Was it British, is that right? I don't know. What's that? Yeah, what's their penny or their cent? Pence, yeah. 89 pence. So that's how you read these codes. The first code tells you what you're about to get the price of. It's the commodity, the currency. The second one is, here's what we're going to quote it in. So this is the dollar price of the euro, the yen price of a euro, the pound price of a euro. This is the yen price of a dollar, the dollar price of a pound, the dollar price of an Aussie, the dollar price of a CAD, Canadian. This is a Swiss franc price of $1 US. This is the Swiss franc price of $1 US. This is the Hong Kong dollar price of $1 US. This is the Swiss franc price of €1. So it costs 1.13 Swissies to buy a euro. And here's the South Korean won's price of $1. So that's how you always read these codes. Okay? So you could Google right now EUR USD, and what should pop up on your phone is $1.18, right? Because that'll be the right code.
Canadian price of US?
Pardon me?
The US CAD. This is the Canadian dollar price of the US dollar?
This is the, I'm sorry, I don't know what I said, but it is the Canadian dollar price of $1. I might have flipped it when I said it. Sorry about that. Yeah, it's the Canadian dollar price of $1. So the second code determines what the symbol you're going to write here is. The first code tells you what you're about to get the price of. I'm sorry if I mixed that up. All right, so that's how the world works. And you can see on this web page, there's nothing that helps you, right? There's no symbols here. You just got to look at the codes and know what you see. All right, let's just do some basic transactions. You know, most of us deal with the euro or have dealt with the euro, and so we all kind of have an intuitive feel. Sometimes you multiply, sometimes you divide, and you generally get it right. But then you lose that ability when you start talking about funky currencies you're not used to. So let's just do basic currencies to make sure we can do any transaction. So the price of a ticket to the Eiffel Tower is 38.5 euros. If the exchange rate is $1.20 a euro, what did it cost you in dollars? Let me show you the easiest way to do any transaction. You'll never get it wrong, ever. Write the price of the thing you know, 38 euros. Figure out what you need. I need $1. I want to figure out what dollars that means. Therefore, you need an exchange rate that turns euros into dollars. So the question is, do I need the dollar price of a euro or do I need the euro price of $1? Again, most of you have this intuition, oh, I should divide or oh, I should multiply. But let me show you that. To go from euros to dollars, what we need, this is the best way to visually I can do it, is I need $1 over euro exchange rate. So in some sense, these are kind of canceling out, right? And what goes forward is the dollar. So I must need $1 per euro exchange rate. When that's multiplied times a euro, that gives me $1, because in some sense, this cancels out. Easy. But what if you do it the other way around? What's the euro cost of $150? Right? Say you go to the airport and you want to buy you want to exchange $150 for euros. How many euros do I get? Well, in that case, you start with dollars. You want to get to euros. The only way to get there is use a euro per dollar exchange rate. You're quoted $1 per euro exchange rate, so it must be 1 over 120 is the euro over dollar exchange rate. So I need to divide. But most of us just kind of do the shortcut. Oh, I'll just take 150 divided by 120, right? But that's what you're doing, is you're multiplying times 1 over 120. You okay? Easy peasy? All good? All right, well, that's it. That's all you need to know about doing any transaction ever. Where it always gets difficult is I'm always trying to figure out, this is actually the harder part, what exchange rate am I actually looking at? Because I need to know that to know whether I need to flip this one or not flip it. That becomes the hardest part. Shekels for your friends from last year. You arrive in Tel Aviv and you buy $150 worth of shekels. How many shekels did you get for $150? Well, if I want to go from dollars to shekels, I need to put dollars in the denominator, so these cancel out and bring shekels forward. So, it must be I'll just multiply times 3.6. That is the shekel price of $1. Cool. So it must be 540 shekels will give me $150. But then you go to lunch the first day and they tell you that a falafel costs 30 shekels. Well, how much dollars that is? How much when I get a feel for how many dollars that's going to cost me? Well, if you have 30 shekels and I want to figure out the dollar value of that, I need $1 over shekel exchange rate, so these shekels go away. So I must have to flip the 360. Or probably just 30 over 3.6. That's it. That is the entire way of thinking. That's your entire program right there. You have an MBA in currency transactions, all right? I'll print that out. So here's just more practice. How many dollars for 10,000 yen? Well, to get to yen to dollars, I need dollar over yen. So I'll multiply times 1 over 78. How many pounds is $10,000? Well, to go from dollars to pounds, I need pounds on the top and dollars on the bottom, so they cancel out. I need to flip 1 over 55. All right, and here's where a lot of smart people just have an intuitive sense for exchange rates, right? But here's where you lose it. How many Peruvian Nuevo Sol are exchanged for 220 Chilean pesos? Holy crap. I don't know divide or multiply at that point, right? So then you're just relying on the math. Well, if I have 5,000 sol and I want to get pesos, I need a Chilean peso over sol exchange rate. That is a peso per sol exchange rate. Cool. So I can just multiply times 220. So it's all just mathematics of trying to figure out what's in the numerator, what's in the denominator. Where I find that most people have the trouble is, were you able to recognize that way of saying the price there was this? Did you recognize that this says that? That becomes, I find, the biggest confusion in the class. Until you get used to seeing the different ways it's communicated the exchange rate. Because a lot of times you don't see, so in here, it doesn't say anything about an exchange rate. It just says the price of the sol is 220 pesos. So you just got to, it must be 220 pesos per sol. And that's the way it's usually described. The price of the peso is, or sol is this. Any questions? Pretty good? All right. Oh my God, cross rates kill people. Here's one of you may have to be sacrificed for this problem. The peso is selling for 700 pesos per dollar, quoted indirect for an American, and the Peruvian Nuevo Sol is selling for 3.5 sol per dollar, both quoted against a common currency, the dollar, in indirect terms. However, your company is going to exchange sol for peso. How do I convert sol into peso when I have two exchange rates that only deal with dollars? there's the two-step method and the one-step method. So again, you see what I'm trying to do? I'm trying to convert 10,000 peso into sol. How many is it going to be? If they're both quoted against a common currency, you can do the two-step process. Trade into the third currency, and then trade out of that third currency. So for example, if I'm going from 10,000 pesos to sol, but I don't have a peso per sol exchange rate, I could simply just turn it into dollars first. Dollar over peso exchange rate. Oh, 10,000 pesos is $14. And then turn $14 into sol. $14 times a sol over dollar exchange rate is 50 sol. Everyone's head's exploding for 10 and 20 in the morning. That's the two-step process. A lot of people like the two-step process. I like the one-step process. No one else likes the one-step process. The one-step process is this. If I'm going to go from 10,000 pesos to sol, all I need is a sol over peso exchange rate, right? I just need to multiply times the sol over peso exchange rate. So I need a sol over peso exchange rate. Well, I can build a sol per peso exchange rate by taking a sol over dollar exchange rate, multiplying a dollar over peso exchange rate. The dollars cancel out, and I wind up with a sol over peso exchange rate, which happens to be 3.5 over 700, because the sol per peso is 3.5, and the dollar per peso is 1 over 700. So that winds up being, the exchange rate is 3.5 over 700, and I just use that. Everyone hates that way. But eventually you come to love that way, because it's just easier. Yeah, I don't know, yeah, you go with whatever method, either trade into the foreign currency, the third currency, then trade out of the third currency, or try to build an exchange rate that you need. You okay? All right? Okay? All right. That's as hard as it gets. All right. You know I got to give you a quiz problem next week on cross currency. You know I'm going to do it to you. Yeah, I have to. It's my obligation to do it to you. I bet Temple doesn't. They probably stick with just simple problems, all right? You could have gone there, all right? You could have gone there. All right, sorry about that. EBITDA. I go back and forth on that one. All right. Another, almost seems a trivial thing, but how do you calculate the percent appreciation of a currency? Like, oh, that should be easy. Just take new exchange rate minus old over exchange rate over old exchange rate, right? The percent change formula is always new minus old over old. Why are you telling me this? Yes, that is always the percent change formula. But with an exchange rate, whether you use dollar over euro or euro over dollar, tells you something different. So if I do this using the dollar per euro exchange rate, this will tell me the appreciation of the euro. But if I do this using the yen over dollar exchange rate, plug this in, it's actually telling me what happened to the dollar, not the yen. It'll tell me what happened to the price of the dollar, quote it in yen. So that's where it gets confusing. Direct and indirect. It just gets confusing. What was the appreciation of the currency? And you can't just change the sign, by the way. You can't just plug anyone you want in and just say, well, I know it's an indirect, so I'll just make it a negative sign. So here's what you do. If you have a direct quote currency, those four currencies are always quoted direct. Just do new minus old over old for the euro, the Aussie, the Kiwi, and the pound. That'll tell you the appreciation of the euro, the pound, the Aussie, and the Kiwi. All right, why is that number important? Well, if the euro appreciated 10%, that means my German beer costs 10% more when I go there next year. That means that your revenues that you sold to the the product you sold to the French, you're going to get 10% more dollar revenues. All right, that's a handy number to have. What was the appreciation of the currency or the expected appreciation of the currency? However, when you have an indirect quote currency like the peso or the yen, you can't use new minus old over old. Well, you can, but it gets confusing. If you want to use new minus old over old and you have an indirect quote like the yen per dollar exchange rate, right? The only way to solve this problem is to continue to use the new minus old over old percent change formula, but just flip every exchange rate. Just, if the exchange rate went from, say, 100 to 110, just do 1 over 110 minus 1 over 100 over 1 over 100 and convert it all to direct terms. And that'll tell you the appreciation of the yen. Because if you don't flip it, it's telling you the appreciation of the dollar. You okay with that?
Whatever.
So basically what I'm saying is convert everything to direct first, then use the percent change formula. So try.
So whatever the evaluation currency that you're trying to find, try to find a way to put it on the denominator.
Yeah, just make it at a dollar price of it. And here's what I hate to tell you. It's like the two-step process here. There's a simpler way, but most people, it makes their head explode until they appreciate the simpler way. It just so happens that mathematically, 1 over new over 1 over old over 1 over old, mathematically, the magic of math turns out to be old minus new over new. And that's just what I do. So if I'm given a direct quote currency, pound, euro, Kiwi, Aussie, I just do new minus old over old and it tells me what happened to those 4 currencies. Every other currency, I just do old minus new over new. It's kind of the weird way of doing percent change. The one that does actually doesn't make any sense. But just mathematically, it just turns out to be just by inverting every one of the numbers, mathematically it's the same thing. And I don't have to do 3 extra mathematical calculations in my spreadsheet. So here's the example. Say the euro goes from $1.50 to $1.65. This is an old example. What just appreciated? What just appreciated if the quote for the euro went from 150 to 165? Did the dollar appreciate or the euro? Euro. How much? Easy. New minus old over old, 10%. Euro's up 10%. My wine's 10% more expensive. My hotel in Paris, 10% more expensive. My everything's 10% more expensive in euro for an American. The cost of my inputs for my product are 10% more expensive. My revenues are 10% less in dollar terms. All right. Now, for a German trying to figure out what happened to the dollar. So say there's a German firm, Bayer or someone like that, or BMW, trying to figure out what happened to the dollar. They can't just say, oh, it must be negative 10. They have to flip everything if they want to know what happened to the dollar and do 1 over 160, 1 over 165 or 1 over 150 over 1 over 150. Or they could just do that old minus new over new, and it turns out to be negative 9%. So this is a weird part. The exchange rate goes from $1.50 to $1.65. It actually is a 10% appreciation of the euro, but only a 9% devaluation of the dollar. And that's because it's just a dealing with ratios. Percent changes on ratios. It's just not the same number, that's all. Going from 150 to 165 is a different percent change than going from 1 over 150 to 1 over 165. It's just a different percent change, that's all. But for business people, we need to know percent changes because we know our margins, right? If I know I only have, an 11% margin, it makes a big difference if the percent change in the currency is 9 or 10. Right? It makes a big difference. All right, any questions on this so far? Yeah.
Can you go back to the Chile example?
This one?
Yeah, so Chile, they kind of maintain 2 currency standards, CLF and CLP. And similar to the cross rates, when they do the matching after the exchange rates, they have to do for both the currencies.
So they have 2 currencies running, is one for like financial assets and one for, what is it?
Chilean peso and another is CLF. And part of my job, part of the procurement application, whenever the Chilean people they buy or sell anything, so they want conversion in CLF and CLP.
Okay. I know nothing about that, but I'd like you to Remind me, I'll maybe look at that over lunch maybe.
So what we are doing currently is we are doing a three-way matching kind of thing. So we convert CLF to dollars.
But why, what's the second, what are the two exchange rates?
And CLF.
Yeah, what is that though? What's CLF?
CLF is another currency form, so no, so it reads till we need that day for inputs.
All right, I have to look at, CLP is the normal currency. Yeah.
So in the application what we do is generally we do a three-way conversion and a three-way match, but to the end of the day when we do the conversion rates, when it goes down to 4 or 5 decimal place, there is always a difference.
All right, I'm gonna take a look.
You may have to do the two-step process. Google.
That's why I love this class. I learn things every day. All right, I will look into that and see what you're talking about. I'm not familiar with it. I've heard countries at different times having kind of two currencies, one for, what's that, Cuba, yeah, well, not even just black market and regular market, it's just like some currencies used for international transactions and it's regulated by the government, but others, so I need to see what's going on with that. All right. All right, so here's another Chilean peso. Say the Chilean peso goes from 600 to 700. All right, so something just appreciated, right? Something went from 600 to 700. What just appreciated? The US dollar, thank you. Yeah, so the initial reaction is, oh, that's the exchange rate with the peso. It looks like no, the dollar just appreciated from 600 pesos to 700 pesos. The Chilean currency went from 1 over 600 to 1 over 700. That's what happened to the peso. That's what happened to the dollar price of the peso. Went from 1 over 600 to 1 over 700. So, if you want to use the new minus old over old formula, in this case, it's going to tell you what happened to the dollar. The dollar is up 16% against the peso. However, if you just flip all the exchange rates, you'll see that what actually happened to the peso is it's down 14% against the dollar. So my Chilean cost of goods from an American importer may have just gone down 14%, not 16%. That's a big difference. But this is a pain in the butt flipping three things, so I'll just take old minus new over new, and that'll tell me exactly what happened to the peso. So again, this is really confusing. I'm sorry about that, but it's just what happened to the price of the peso. You know, what happened to the peso, right? Well, you have to have two exchange rates, the dollar and the peso, and you can either quote it two different ways, either the dollar price of the peso or the peso price of the dollar. So you have to always kind of keep in your head, am I explaining what happened to the price of the peso, quote it in dollars, or am I trying to explain what happened to the dollar, or peso, quote it in dollars, or peso, quote it in, or dollars, quote it in pesos. So that's good, yeah.
That typo after CLB,
Oh, sorry about that. Yeah, appreciation in general terms allow negatives. So we just say, what's the appreciation? Oh, it's down 5%. So yeah, sorry about that. Okay. Yeah, I'm a finance nerd. We just kind of use appreciation as a generic term for percent change. Yeah.
And would it be wrong to say you don't really have to think, because if you use that formula, you get a negative number?
That is a good answer. So as long as you know the sign of it, you'll almost never get it wrong. The only way to get it, the only way to get it wrong is do this. These are always the same. Always repeat the second number in the denominator. Just make sure your base is the old. But that's the only mistake I see if you kind of have a feel if it's negative or positive, is just making sure that this number repeats. Okay. But yeah, it's not foolproof, but you're going to eliminate half your errors and you're left with a smaller error. Yeah. So you went from a random guess to a pretty good, and also your error is going to be small. 100 over 700 over 100 over 600. At least it's in the ballpark. It's not, the sign is not correct. Right? People lose their jobs over signs, right? Negative versus positive. They generally don't lose their job over the base is off. Yes. Question.
What I'm really appreciating from this is kind of right? We can't do the same logic anymore.
Oh, the same formula. So 600 to 590, what you're saying is the dollar must have just appreciated, so the peso must have appreciated, so the percent appreciation of the peso must be positive. So yeah, I would just, it's the same. I would just plug in 590s to all these. I would replace 700s with all the 590s. Yeah.
So it would be 600 minus
Yeah,
then you will get a positive number, and that will say that you
is appreciating, which it is. Going from 600 to 590 is an appreciation of the peso. It hurts me to say that, because you're so, when you see numbers go up, it's hard to say depreciation. If you see numbers go down, it's hard to say appreciation. All right, but that's what's going on. Yeah. All right, that didn't kill you, did it? No, it's just more. So the peso goes from 600 to 700. Here's just kind of more of the same. Say you're going to stay in a hotel in Santiago, and it's going to cost 130,000 pesos. Before the change, when the exchange rate was 600, that would have cost you $216, right? 130,000 pesos divided by the $600 per peso exchange rate. I did a little shorthand there. So it would have cost $216 before the change. With the new exchange rate, it would cost me $185 to stay in that hotel in Santiago. So the change in price of my hotel in Santiago, it's down 14%. Well, that's what this is actually telling me. All I'm doing is trying to make a connection that if the price of the good stays quoted in pesos, the actual percent change of the currency is telling you as an American how much cheaper or more expensive a good just got. Whether my imports or exports, that's all it's telling me. Now, for a Chilean going to New York City and the hotel is $400 a night, that used to cost them, when the exchange rate was 600, 240,000 pesos. At the new exchange rate, it's 280,000 pesos. That means, if I just do the percent change formula, I just did a shorthand. Instead of new minus old over old, you can just take new over old minus 1. I just ran out of space. That was a 16% increase in the price of a hotel in New York for a Chilean. That's what this is telling you. So that's why we need to have those two numbers. Are you an importer or exporter? Are you from Chile or from America? Because depending on what you are, that 16 or 14% is what you need to use. All right. Oh God, this is tough. I hate to do this to you. I think Temple skips this lecture, this part, this right here. I don't need, Temple must be fine, but I like to pick on somebody, right? Here's a shorthand. The equation I gave you this morning, which now, was that this morning? That was yesterday and this morning. It seems like a month ago. I gave you this formula that the new exchange rate equals the old exchange rate times relative inflation rates, right? Or interest rates. I gave you that equation. Is that right? Well, I'm going to take that equation, divide both sides by today's exchange rate. And I wind up with this. The ratio of the new exchange rate over the old exchange rate is equal to, according to PPP, the ratio of these inflation rates. Okay, so what? This is the new expected exchange rate over today's exchange rate. That is new over old, right? That's the new expected exchange rate over the old. New over old, the new exchange rate over the old. Say the old exchange rate. Let's do the euro, the one I gave you. Say the old exchange rate is $1.50, and the new exchange rate is $1.65. If I do new over old, if I divide 165 over 150, what do I get? What's 165 over 150? 1.1. What's the appreciation of the euro there? 10%? So, new minus old is really 1 plus the appreciation. All right, I'm trying to get you to a shorthand here. It's going to be painful, but once you have this ability, it's kind of a useful thing to have. So, 1 plus the appreciation of a currency is new over old. That's equal to the relative inflation, the ratio of this relative inflation rates. Okay, so what? You could use that little information to make a guess on what's going to happen to the appreciation of a currency. And here's the big step. U.S. inflation is expected to be 3%. Mexican inflation is going to be 13%. If I take 1 plus the US inflation over 1 plus the peso inflation. All right? And subtract 1. That's going to tell me the expected appreciation of the peso. I'm basically just rearranging this formula here. And if I know the two inflations, and I know that the left hand of the equation is 1 plus the appreciation, if I just take the ratio of the two inflations and subtract 1, that tells me the expected appreciation or depreciation of the currency. It's just a little shorthand. That's all. And I also need to show you this. You know, a lot of you have, some businesses are very thin margins. You know, 5, 10, 15, 20% thin margins, not like the, you know, Microsoft margins of 60%, right? You have thin margins, so these 1% make a difference. Remember I said you can just take the difference between 12 and 3, that'll be a good guess what happened to the currency? Yeah. Oh, it must be a 9% devaluation of the peso since they have 9% less inflation. That's not a bad guess, but it's actually going to be 8. 9 is a first approximation. The actual percent change in price of the goods in Mexico after this change is going to be 8%, not 9. That's all. So it's just a little shortcut to get the exact expected appreciation based on interest rates or inflation rates. Okay. Here's the trick. How'd I know to do 103 over 112 and not 112 over 103? Oh my God, you're ahead of me. It took me 10 years to make that statement. Because if you want to know what happened to the peso, this equation has to be all in dollar price of a peso, which means this must be dollar over peso. Everyone else will catch up to you in a minute. I'm checked out. Because you can wind up with a question. So the problem is if I ask you, as a Mexican, how much more expensive are American goods? So basically, what happened to the dollar? I actually need to do peso over dollar. So here's your shortcut. Whatever one we're trying to figure out, like what happened to the peso, put the peso in the denominator. If I say what happened to the dollar, put the dollar in the denominator. So that becomes the answer. But minus 9's not a bad guess, by the way. Minus 8's more precise.
How will you grade that?
You'll get very close to full credit.
Good enough for me.
But if your company only has a 1% profit margin, you just bankrupt the company based on your big little guess. If you got 50% margins, who cares? 8, 9, whatever. That was fun, wasn't it? All right. So we talked about forward rates last month, seems like. Right, that was actually just yesterday, right? Or this morning, I don't even remember. We talked about forward rates. Forward rates, banks are willing to quote you rates to trade currencies next year, which you have to, but you're contractually obligated to do it, and they're contractually obligated to do it. However, I hate to do this to you, but the currencies are usually quoted in funky ways. So here's I don't even read this, but this is a Reuters exchange rate. Here's how they're usually presented in Bloomberg and most financial websites. They don't actually give you this. Here's what they tell you. The spot price of the euro is 147.86. This is old. The 1 year forward is negative 242. That's what they tell you. Most webs, if you Google the exchange rate right now for the euro, you'll see numbers that look like this. You're like, that's not an exchange. What does that even mean? What does it mean that the 1 year forward is negative 242? All right, I need to show you this, because very few places actually will tell you how to turn this into this. Because this is usually, so if you Google it right now, you'll find probably from investing.com is the only place I've found that gives free forward rates. And it's going to look like this. I mean, we could do that, but I'll just show you how to convert this. So what does this even mean? Well, let me tell you. You call the bank or go to your Bloomberg machine. You look up the current spot price, today's price of the euro, and it says 125.46, 125.78. So I got this a few years ago. Why is there two exchange rate? We're going to deal with those a little bit later. Well, one's a price to buy currencies, one's a price to sell currencies, right? They're a middleman. They're a middle person, right? They're just trying to make money between the buyers and the sellers. So if you want to buy euros, what are you going to pay? Yeah, you'll wind up paying 125.78. All right, if you want to buy them, and if you want to sell them, you'll get 125.46. That's what's going on. You know, we're talking about fractions of pennies. It's a very efficient market, fractions of pennies. You okay? Before I even get to that, let me also say that sometimes I'll read news articles. The price of the euro, it closed at 118.27, and it's up 2 points. So I'll read articles like that all the time. The euro's up. The euro's at 118.27. It's up 2 points for the day. So what are they talking about points? In the currency market, every currency is quoted in either 2, 3, or 4 currency decimal places. Most of them have 4. The euro is always quoted in 4 decimal places. And what people and the currency markets don't change as much as you'd think, especially the stable currencies like the euro. So when traders and financial people talk about changes in exchange rate, what they generally talk about is what's happening to the last decimal place. So if this exchange rate goes to 125.48, what they'll say is it's up 2 points. It's not up $2, it's up 2 points. So 1 point is the last decimal place. Does that make sense? So it's up 2 points. And so it's just a nice little jargon. You're going to go, hey, where's the euro? I called this morning at 10, it's now 11. Where's the euro today? Converse for all that. Oh, it's up 2 points. We're still good. Yeah.
What's the bid and ask? And you see that when you're like buying stocks too.
Yeah.
Obviously it's minuscule.
All right, so as someone from the bank's perspective, if they gave only one price to buy and sell a stock or buy and sell a currency, they would be a nonprofit organization, unless they charge a transaction fee. So in the currency markets, there's generally no transaction fee. So if they had one price for the euro, they'd be a nonprofit organization. So what they say is, I'll buy euros for 125, all right, and I'll sell them for 127. So they're trying to make a difference. So when you see a bid and ask price, let me see this one. This is the price in which you can buy currencies. This is the price, and actually, look, it's only off by 0.01 pennies, right? That's less than a penny. That's 100th of a penny. The difference between buying and selling is 1 point. Or they call it a pip. Not Gladys Knight and the pips, a pip, price point. A price point is called a pip or a point. So they might say the bid's 147.86 plus 1 pip for the ask, or 1 point for the ask. Is that all right?
It goes a little off topic, but when I do that in my Ameritrade account, they still charge me a fee.
Sometimes they'll do both, bid and ask price and a fee. Yeah. Well, hey, sometimes I get mad over that stuff like that, but what margin am I making on you, right? What margin are you getting on a surgery? What margin are you getting on a Caterpillar? So they're getting like 100th of a penny. Yeah.
So pity the
poor bankers.
So the currency just has two decimals. So your 1 point up or down is just going to be at the second.
Just a penny, if it's a direct quote. We'll get to a 2 decimal place right there. But let's look at the 4 decimal place currency, the euro. So here's what usually I would find if I went to any screen that told me, if I'm looking for, say, the 1 year forward price. They're not actually going to give me a price. Now, the price turns out to be this, right? This turns out to be the price, but they never tell me that, and their website generally never has that information. What they tell me is this. The spot price is 125.46 bid, 120.78 ask. Negative 49 points on the bid, negative 40 points on the ask for a 1 year delivery. Huh, okay. Well, let's find out. 49 points. 1 point would be changing this number by 1, right? So when they say 49 points, what you basically have to do is right justify this to the quote. So 49 points must be, and here's that translating down here, what you're actually subtracting is a negative number here, negative 0.0049. So what they're telling me is it's 49 points less for a 1-year delivery. So I can buy, today the transaction would be 125.46. That's actually if I'm selling the currencies, I'll get 125.46. If I commit to selling them next year, I'll get 124.97. 49 points less. What they're doing is they're forecasting a devaluation of the euro. Right, that's what's going on here, why they're negative. And they're willing to lock in to 124.97 for a 1-year delivery and 125.46 for today delivery. The negative 40 points, negative 0.0040. So you're basically always right. So here's how I write it on my piece of paper. 125.78, right? And then if someone tells me to subtract 40 pips, I just right justify it and then fill in zeros. That's how I do it. I've been doing it for a decade. I still do it that way. You just right justify the pips or points and fill in with zeros. So they're just talking about the last so many pips or points. I usually say points.
How do you go to that 242 number?
I'll get there. Yeah. Well, let's do that. What if it were this quote? What would I do? What if the quote were negative 249, negative 240? That's it. That's all they're telling me. I think it was 2 something. He has negative 2 something or positive 200 and something. That's it. What if they said it was 2,000? Well, that's good. I would just subtract. Well, I have 1.2546. So I would subtract 2490. That's it. And if it were 1 pip, I would just subtract 0.0001. That's it. That's how the financial world works. That's what they mean with all these points. My basic theory in finance people aren't that bright, right? We don't send we don't send rockets to Mars. We don't have to do anything, right? We buy and sell stuff. But if we make it superficially complicated, you got to hire me at it, $1,000 an hour to tell you how to add pips to your exchange rate, and you feel good about it. When you probably could have taught a 7th grader this, and you have to hire me just because you don't even understand what the person just said. Hey, I need help hedging. I just called the bank and they said it's 118.9 and 2 pips for a 1-year delivery versus 5 pips for a 6-month delivery. Help me. Well, they could have just given you full quotes, but what's the fun in that? Where's the fee in that? All right. 2 decimal place currency. Same theories. So the yen's quoted in 2 decimal places. So it might be 78.45 bid, 55 ask, and the 1-year delivery is 122. Oh my God, get rid of that decimal place. I'll add that back in a minute. If it said 122, I would right justify 122 against that spot rate. 78.45, 122, and then plug in that decimal place. That's all I do. I'm just forget about this thing because that's going to make your head explode. You okay with that? Just right justify the points. So what the hell is that? Oh, they want to give me the 3rd decimal place. Okay. they're communicating a forward price with 3 decimal places, even though the spot price only has 2. The only way to do that is give fractions of a point. Wow. That allows me to understand what this just meant. When the spot price of the euro is 147.86, and they're telling me 1 year delivery is negative 242.25 points. What I'm going to do is, I do it somewhere here. I do it right here. I need to right justify the 242. That's the 4th decimal place right there. This becomes the 5th and the 6th decimal place. So I'm going to take 147.86. I'll right justify the 242, fill in a 0, and then this must be the 5th and 6th decimal place. All right, I used to not go over this in class, and then students would come back to me like, thanks for all the knowledge, but I have nowhere to start. Like, I don't even know what the forward rate is. So it's just trying to decode the world. This is how they communicate exchange rates with points. Forward prices. Reuters, there's a lot of messy here, but it looks the same way. Here's the spot price, and they're telling me negative 40 points and negative 40 points for the 1 month. And here's a Canadian dollar, negative 124 points for the bid, negative 122 for the ask. So that's how generally, financial information are going to give you points and not full quotations for the forward. Now, another advantage of the points, I think the history comes back to newspapers, that they had to try to print all the stuff in newspapers. But actually, once you start getting into points, it's really nice to see visually. Whoa, they're forecasting a devaluation over the next year, just by the fact that the points are negative and getting bigger. There's some value to that visualization. That it's getting really cheaper. The euro is getting really cheaper, in the next year. That's what I could lock in. Some people like that. Just focusing on differences versus levels. Yeah.
So if somebody says that a $50 million project is a 2-point savings on our earnings, does that have to do with this?
No. What they're probably talking about is just the dollar price of earnings per share. Yeah. 2 point. Yeah, they're probably talking about dollars and cents, or 2 cents difference in earnings per share. Yeah, they're probably not talking about these points.
I think it's kind of the same analogy. It depends on how, because I see that in percent, but they want to say percent points when they go like to decimals. It's kind of the same thing. It's just like a small.
Yeah, that's a good point. So if your EPS forecast is $1.55, you might say we missed it by 2 points. Even though it's 2 cents, but some people just talk about that. So that's it. This is the forward market. Again, generally there are no fees. It's just they make money on the bid-ask spread. And also it's kind of a big bank has business with you. It's kind of, they also provide foreign currency services. And they probably don't make a lot of money on the currency. Where they do make money is, oh, I see you're trading currencies. You want us to take your FX hedging in-house for us to do for you? So a lot of banks will offer that fact. You just send me all your payables in every currency in the world. I'll just hedge them for you, and I'll just bill you. So a lot of banks will do that. So so this is not a big money-making operation, and it's a very efficient market. All the prices are on Bloomberg, so you're not making a killing. Yeah, you can see here on these, just the bid and ask on here. Again, they're buying currency at 147.86 and selling it at 147.87. They're making 0.01 cents per euro when they buy and sell a euro. The market is one of the most efficient markets in the world. Because it's a commodity that's identical to every single person, and it's traded all around the globe. So it's a very transparent market because of Reuters and Bloomberg. So you're not going to make money on. The banks aren't going to make money on it. All right, last slide here. How do you use this information? If you've got euro receivable due next year, 10 million. don't worry about what's going to happen to the euro. If you know you're going to have 10 million euros, just enter into a contract to sell 10 million euros next year. If you can lock in a nice margin, why wouldn't you? And if you know you're going to buy a piece of equipment for 10 million pounds next year, why wouldn't you get a contract to lock in the price to buy 10 million pounds 1 year from now? If you at that price, it's a fair price, and your your NPV of your project's positive, and it's profitable, why wouldn't you lock in? I don't know why currencies are held to some special, why should we hedge them? Well, why wouldn't you? Wouldn't GM hedge the price of tires? Well, let's just see what tires are selling for next year. Why would we want to lock in a price of anything? Right? Money's just another commodity businesses need. Why wouldn't you lock in the price of it like you lock in the price of every other commodity? And the nice thing about this, it's easier to hedge in every other commodity. You just get access to a Bloomberg machine, you'll see the most efficient price. Within a hundredth of a penny to lock in for next year, or next 2 years, or next 3 years. The only risk is, what's that?
Costs, right?
Yeah.
They're just betting, it's a bet.
If you don't lock in, you're betting.
Yeah, which can go good or bad.
Yeah, exactly. It can go to good or bad.
Did you say there's a Bloomberg machine?
Bloomberg terminals, yeah, in the business building. Yeah.
We have, I know this State College, though, we have access.
Yeah. If you're in State College, let me know. But if you can just go to Bloomberg, try to log in, and they tell you what's your password, there'll be a phone number to call, and they'll just give you a free one. It's Penn State to log in. Yeah. But you can't use it at home. It's only the specialized terminals. Yeah. And yeah.
Your examples are you buying something in another country. If you've got operations in those countries and you have salaries to pay, would you do something similar?
Yeah, exactly. That's what the bid ask is for. So if you need to pay euros next year, you want a contract. If you're paying salaries in euros, what you need to do is buy euros next year to pay them.
Do companies do that?
Yeah. Well, not necessarily salaries, but buying equipment, or buying components. Yeah. So you have a contract to lock in the price to buy the currency that's going to be used to buy the good. Yeah. Yeah.
Question, maybe more answer this. What if it's like internal companies like Otsuka traded in Tokyo but not New York, and then the U.S. company buys tons of hundreds of millions of raw material from Japan.
But it's all within the company.
Yeah, internal.
Yeah. In that case, it's really just whether you want. Yeah. So good question. So you're just buying from another part of your company in another country. I don't think you have to hedge because the company's always going to be whole. One's going to be a loser, one's going to be a winner. So I wouldn't necessarily hedge that transaction unless you want every business unit to have their own P&L and be responsible for their own P&L. In that case, I would actually think about hedging. I don't know. I don't know if I'd hedge any internal transfer because it's not necessarily actually moving money. Yeah, I'd say internal. I probably wouldn't.
One component of it that we could probably hedge is the distribution, right? Because we outsource it out to like a third-party company that every shipment over here is $20,000, and we do that every year.
Sure, you can hedge that, but again, if it's internal, at some point someone will just say, we won't count any currency changes against each unit. We don't want to waste time hedging internal transfers. So I can see it going either way. Now, a couple years ago, we had a student that he's working in aviation, and they just want a contract, some foreign contract in Europe to do a really expensive, supply of some kind of high-tech aviation. It was in the order of like hundreds of millions of euros. They won the contract a year ago. They know exactly what they were going to deliver and how many euros they're going to get. The company chose not to hedge, and the exchange rate went against them because at the time Greece was having trouble, and they took a bath about $30 million. At the time in which they won that contract, they were contractually obligated to deliver a good and receive euros. They had to make one phone call. They would have locked in that exchange rate, and they would not have had that loss. Now, some people say, well, it could have gone in their favor. They could have made $30 million if the euro went the other direction. Like, yeah, but when you know, if you want to play that game, but you signed up on the contract, you had a nice profit, why not lock in? Why go to bed every night worrying about what's going to happen to the, Germany and Brexit? Why not just lock in? Like, it's so easy to lock in the price of a currency. In that case, the most obvious case where it's a contractual obligation for like a 2-year delivery, why did no one think of this?
So purchasing departments, I guess, do all most purchasing departments take advantage of this?
I don't think they do. I think a lot of the hedging is done at the Treasury, corporate Treasury. But it could be done by purchasing.
I don't think that we do it for like fleet operations, for example. Maybe equipment, I don't even know if we do it for equipment purchases, so I'm just thinking this is something that maybe other companies also do sell.
Yeah, I mean, my impression is if it's a significant cost or revenue based on another currency, I think most developed or sophisticated countries will hedge almost 80 to 90% of their expected foreign exchange exposure over the next year, or next year to 18 months.
Even as government.
No, not just private companies. GM, for example, hedges 80% of their FX exposure over a 12 to 18 month period. So they'll actually forecast what revenues they're going to get, what yen they're going to get, what yen they're going to pay, and they'll have contracts lined up for the next 12 months on roughly 80% of the volume. And the only reason they don't do 100% is because they're worried they don't know the quantity will actually be the exact number. So they'll just, from forecasting 100 million euros in revenue, they'll enter into a contract to sell 80 million of the euros a year from now, just to hedge 80% of their exposure. And I think that's a pretty common thing to do. Just hedge 70, 80, 90% of your expected foreign exchange inflows and outflows for say the next 12 months. All right. So that's it. Let's take a little break. That was fun, wasn't it? I have 11:06. Next lecture is pretty short, I think. So 11:25. Nice big break. 11:25. Right. So we got till 12:15, right? 11:25.